Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for tuning in this evening for our online Bible study. Let's get into it. I welcome you. If you are new to this study, I'm Pastor Dave St. Aubin. It's a joy to be with you here this evening. Tonight, we will be concluding our look at chapter 6 of the Gospel of Mark. So I invite you to grab your Bibles, open them up to Mark chapter 6, beginning with verse 30. Grab something to take some good notes with, grab a beverage, grab a snack. Let's get into it. Well, again, good evening and welcome, and thanks for tuning in. I do pray that your day has been going well. Pray that your week's been going well. Happy Friday. Good to be with you here again this evening as we continue our journey through the Bible one chapter at a time. And tonight we are concluding our look at the Gospel of Mark, chapter 6. And just to recap where we were at last night, Jesus had sent out his 12 disciples and charged them with the responsibility of carrying out his ministry. They were, in a sense, his ambassadors to the people. And tonight we're going to begin by picking up with that account and the 12 returning. But we're going to see that Jesus doesn't have much to ask them about what happened. The next focus is going to be on miracles. Specifically, the one we're going to look at tonight is the feeding of the 5,000. So let's get right into it here. Open up your Bibles to Mark chapter 6, beginning with verse 30. And if you don't have a Bible with you, not a problem. As always, all the verses are right up here on the screen, so you can follow along. Take some good notes tonight. Not a long study tonight, but let's get right into it here. In this first verse, verse 30, this is the conclusion of the mission of the 12 that Mark recorded that Jesus had sent out in chapter 6, verses 7 through 13. And with that portion of this training of the disciples concluded, Jesus is going to move into the next stage of training. So verse 30. The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all that they had done and all that they had taught. This is the only time in Mark's gospel that he calls these 12 apostles. Apostles means sent one. Disciples are followers. Apostles are messengers. So now they are apostles. They have been sent, and they come back. They return to the one who had commissioned them, sent them out, to give their report about everything that happened during their mission. Right? They're coming back from a mission trip. And there's really not much said about it here. With the exception of Judas, though, these other 11 men would become the official apostles of the early church. But here they're coming back from this mission trip to give a report of everything that took place. And this would have been somewhere probably near Capernaum in Galilee. And again, there's not much shown here about what took place. It's kind of glossed over. And what we're going to go into next here is a continuation of this theme where, since everybody is rejecting Jesus and his message, his focus is shifting on to training his apostles here. So that's what's going to happen next. And there's a really long introduction to this particular miracle in Mark's gospel. It's a demonstration of Jesus' humanity and his deity. And if you recall last night, we looked at this this banquet that Herod Antipas held in his palace, at which his his brother-in-law's wife's daughter, his brother's wife's daughter, Salome, right, wanted the head of John the Baptist on a platter. So he holds this big banquet. Here, we see the simplicity of this meal. It's a comparison to Herod's selfish banquet that resulted in the death of a righteous holy man, John the Baptist, to the compassion of Christ feeding this mass of people. The emphasis here is on how Jesus cares for his own. So the 12 return, they tell Jesus about everything that they had done, and then, verse 31, because so many people were coming and going that they didn't even have a chance to eat, Jesus said to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." So that verse 31 really doesn't appear in any of the other Gospels. Jesus is providing rest for his busy servants who had just come back from this mission trip. He's leading them out to a solitary place, an uninhabited place, a deserted, secluded place. All these crowds, right, greater than ever, pressing in on them. So they retreat to a secluded, uninhabited place where the crowds are likely not to follow. This would have been somewhere in the area around the Sea of Galilee. And again, it's interesting. Mark doesn't record Jesus' evaluation of any of the work that these 12 just came back to report. We have no information on that whatsoever. The focus is on him teaching his disciples, now apostles. So let's withdraw to a quiet place, get some rest. Verse 32. So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. But many who saw them leaving on the boat recognized them, and they ran on foot from all the towns and got ahead of them. So this is not a huge area. I mean, the Sea of Galilee is large, but where they are at, withdrawing on this boat, the crowds see this, and they know where they're going. So they try to run ahead of them. They are anticipating where Jesus and his disciples are going on this boat. They're most likely on a fishing boat here. So these followers, these crowds, run around the lake on foot as Jesus and his disciples are crossing the lake in a boat to try to get ahead of them. When they landed, verse 34, Jesus saw a large crowd, and he has compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So instead of being frustrated, right, we just want to rest, Jesus sees this crowd of people following them, and he has compassion on them. He sees them all as sheep lacking a shepherd that would provide for their needs. And just as David had done for his sheep, Jesus is going to provide for these sheep in this very remote wilderness area that they had withdrawn to. And so he began teaching them many things. Now, teaching was the greatest need that these masses had. They are craving healing, right? If we could just get close to him, if we could just touch his garments, if he'll heal us, we've seen him do all these things. That's what they are craving. What they need is teaching. And that is what Jesus is going to give to them. Verse 35. So by this time, it's late in the day. So his disciples came to him. And again, this is a teaching moment here. So this is a remote place, they said, right? Jesus said, "Come with me to a secluded place." And that's where they went. Hey, this place is remote. It's getting late. Send these people away so they can go somewhere in the surrounding countryside and buy themselves something to eat. The disciples here are assuming that Jesus wants these people to provide their own meals. And they are reminding Jesus that, hey, it's late. It's quite late. Send them home. Get them out of here so we can rest, they can eat, right? Let's just call it a day. But Jesus has something else in mind. He's wanting to teach. He's wanting to teach his disciples and these multitudes to look to him for their needs. He is the ultimate source of all that they needed, all that we need. The Lord is my shepherd. I have lack of nothing. And this is a conversation between Jesus and the disciples that in Mark's gospel is a lengthy discussion. That's a very distinctive element in Mark's gospel about this feeding of the multitude. Hey, it's getting late, right? We need to rest. They need to eat. Just send them away. But Jesus answered, verse 37, you feed them, right? You give them something to eat. He wants them to realize their inability to do that. This is a teaching moment, right? You feed them. Jesus knows they can't feed them. He's wanting them to realize that they have an inability that only he can meet. So instead of thinking that way, they reply, that would take more than a half year's wages. Are we to go spend that much money on bread and give it to them to eat? So they admit their inability, but they fail to turn to Christ, who has the ability. They're thinking, this is going to cost too much. It's going to take too long. Where are we going to get all the bread from? How are we going to do it? Why don't we keep that money and spend it on something else? He's trying to teach them, right? Their response, you feed them. Their response, well, this will cost too much and it'll be too hard. It shows they had not yet learned to look to him to meet all their needs. Instead of asking him, well, we can't do it, but we know you can, they are calculating the cost of the food. They are concluding they can't afford to pay for it. They don't have the resources. They don't have the manpower. So Jesus, in his teaching, verse 38, how many loaves do you have? Go and see. Go see what you got. When they found out, they came back. We have 5 loaves and we have 2 fish. When Jesus asking how many loaves of bread, he's going to use what they have to feed this multitude. And that's what God does. God uses what we have to meet the needs of others. And 5 loaves of bread, it's not enough. It's inadequate. But those are the elements in this miracle. 5 loaves of bread, 2 fish. Whereas the disciples needed to realize the inadequacy of their resources, they also needed to understand that those were going to be the resources Jesus was going to use. And these were small, flat pieces of bread, almost like a pita bread. One person could eat several of these in a meal. So this is probably enough to feed one person. The fish were probably dried and salted. These were common, a food item. They would be eaten, bones and all, with the bread. So this is enough for one person. And there's at least 5,000 here. What do you have? This is all we have. So Jesus, verse 39, directed the disciples to have all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. And Mark notes the green grass here. So this dates this miracle sometime early spring. John's gospel dates it somewhere near Pentecost, which would have been early April, late March. In the summertime, much of the grass in this area would turn brown. There would be some green grass in places, but this is most likely sometime early spring. And Mark notes that. They sat down in the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and 50s. This was done to facilitate the distribution of food, right? People weren't scattered all over the place. They were in groups, like in a restaurant. Here's your tables, here's your groups of people. So taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, which is all they had, and looking up to heaven, Jesus gave thanks, which means he blessed it, and he broke the loaves. By praying, Jesus gives thanks to God for the food, reminding the people that it came from Him, came from God. And this was a common practice for Jews and the early Christians, right, to give thanks before a meal. So Jesus blesses God for giving the food. He doesn't bless the food itself. He blesses God. Looking up towards heaven clarifies that it's God that Jesus is praying to, God the Father. He looked up to heaven and he gave thanks to the Lord for the provision, not for the provision itself. And Mark doesn't record how Jesus performs this miracle. It's a miracle of multiplication, right? We don't know exactly what's happening here, but this bread is in the hands of God, and He's going to multiply it. And Mark stresses this is Jesus who is doing this. That's the most important point that Mark is making here. He gave thanks, Jesus. He broke the bread. He's going to meet the needs in miraculous ways here. And again, in teaching, it was important for the disciples to focus on the source of the provision, not the means, not the methods that God would use to provide, but on the source. And by thanking God for the food and then providing it miraculously for the people, Jesus is presenting evidence that He is God. Now, those who were picking up what was going on here in the crowd, they would have remembered God's miraculous provision of manna in the wilderness for the Israelites during the time of the Exodus, and they would have concluded this is the same thing, that Jesus is the servant of God. He's delivering what God has provided. He's a second Moses. He is the Lord, the Messiah. And then Jesus gave the bread. He broke it, right? Gave it to his disciples to distribute to the people, to all the people. And He divided the 2 fish among all the people. Now, again, we don't know how this was done. Some type of multiplication going on here with these 5 loaves and 2 fish. But Jesus is serving through the disciples, right? You do it. You go and do this. You present what I am providing to the people. That's the work of a disciple. That's our work. We take what God has provided and share it among the people. That this is a lesson in discipleship. Verse 42, so they all ate and they were all satisfied. And the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish. The abundance and the adequacy of Jesus' provision is obvious here because there are leftovers to be eaten, right? There's still food left. And these baskets were large wicker baskets, but there's only a little bit of food in here, right? Jesus provides generously, but He does not provide so extravagantly that there's needless waste. There's leftovers, there's enough for everyone to eat, everyone is satisfied, no one is sent away from Christ empty. And when we put the will of God first, He will care for our needs and He will provide our daily bread. And 44, the number of men who had eaten was 5,000. Now, Mark records 5,000 men. Matthew added in besides women and children in Matthew chapter 14. So the feeding of 5,000 involved a considerably larger crowd than 5,000. This was probably 10 to 15,000. And this miracle reveals the person of Jesus to the multitudes, but it was the effect on the disciples that Mark is stressing here. This miraculous event contained many lessons about discipleship. and also revelations about Jesus' identity and who he is. So this is the first miracle here in this discipleship training. And this next one is going to follow just a couple of hours later. And both of these miracles are important parts of this discipleship training for these 12 men. Now, this is the account of Jesus walking on the water. Earlier in chapter 4, Jesus had demonstrated his power over nature by calming the storm by speaking a word, "Peace, be still." Here, he's going to demonstrate his power over nature by walking on it, by walking on this storm. So verse 45, immediately, right? There's that word. I've shared this throughout Mark, and I mentioned Mark uses this word very frequently. Immediately, Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to Bethsaida while he stayed back to dismiss the crowd. So they've eaten, everybody is full, they're cleaning up. Now we're going to go back across the sea, right? So you all get in the boat, head towards Bethsaida, which they're not going to, and I will meet you there. And Bethsaida, at least Peter, Andrew, and Philip were from Bethsaida, so they were familiar with where they're going. And this is, again, it's a large fishing boat. This is the same boat that they had taken over to this uninhabited area where they just ate. And it's the stress here is on this mountain, right? That we're going to see in verse 46 here. And why is that important? God appeared to the Israelites from a mountain. That was in Deuteronomy. Moses came down from Sinai in the mountain, receiving the commandments and meeting God. Jesus is going to appear to his disciples after coming down from this mountain in prayer to God. So let's look at this miracle of Jesus walking on the water. Verse 46, after leaving them, right? So you guys go ahead. I'm going to withdraw up this mountainside. So he left them and went up on a mountainside to pray. Again, he's showing his dependence on his Father. He's praying to God the Father. He's on the mountain. The disciples are on the shore, and they're about to push off to head towards Bethsaida. Verse 47. Later that night, the boat was in the middle of the lake. Now, all they had to do was take this boat along the shoreline from where they were to Bethsaida. Why are they out in the middle of the lake? They're way off course here. So they're out in the middle of the lake. He's alone on land on this mountaintop. The boat is, they are far away from where they're supposed to be. Verse 48, Jesus looks down from the mountain, sees the disciples straining at the oars because the wind's against them, right? They have blown out into the middle of the Sea of Galilee. And even though Jesus had been praying, he has not forgotten, he has not forsaken his disciples. He's probably praying for them. And it would have been easy for Jesus to see his disciples from this mountain, from this hilltop. They would have been only a short distance from where he was, even though they're in the middle of the lake. Wouldn't have been far from where he was. And possibly this is late. The moon may have been illuminating the lake, but he sees them. And these storms kick up, and I've mentioned this before. The way the geography around the Sea of Galilee is these storms can kick up at any moment, and the waves can rise 5 to 6 feet. So that's more than enough to swamp a boat like these disciples are in. So they're straining at the oars for their lives, and Jesus sees them. And friend, he sees you too. He sees you in your storm. He knows your struggles. He knows your problems. You don't have to send up a flare to let him know you're in trouble. He sees you. He already knows. He sees the disciples are straining at the oars. Now, at about the fourth watch of the night, he came to them. So the fourth watch of the night, this was a Roman term. So the Romans had 4 watches. This would have been between 3 and 6 a.m. Mark is writing to the Romans, to the Gentiles. So this made sense to them. Between 3 and 6 in the morning, he came to them walking on the sea, and he would have passed them by. So Jesus is walking towards them with the intention to pass by them, to reassure them, so that they would call out to him for help. But when they see him walking towards them on the lake, they think he is a ghost. Now, they don't think he is a ghost in the sense of like a human who has died, and this is a disembodied person. This is an apparition. This is a phantom, right? Not a ghost like we think about today. So he intends to walk past them so that they cry out to him for help, but instead, they don't even think it's him. They think it's a ghost. And they cry out not for him, but because they were terrified by this phantom. Whenever Jesus is absent from the disciples, or appears to be absent from these disciples, they find themselves in distress every time. And every time they experience anguish or fear, it's because of their lack of faith. So immediately, there's that word, Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid. Take courage, stop fearing. It is I." Can translate into this manifestation of God. I am, speaking to Moses. Who shall I say you are? I am that I am. Don't be afraid. It is me. I am. This is an epiphany story. It's Jesus' self-revelation to these followers. And this is the concluding story of these 2 groups of miracles. And what it does is it provides an answer to the question that the disciples asked in chapter 4 when Jesus calmed the storm and they said, "Who is this?" Jesus is now answering, "I am." This is a revelation to them that he is God. And then verse 51, he climbed into the boat with them and the wind died down. Mark omits the account of Peter walking on the water that we saw in Matthew's account, Matthew chapter 14. Why did he do this? We don't know. But the point of this miracle is that they have an understanding of who Jesus is here. Don't be afraid. It is me. He climbs into the boat. Whenever Jesus climbs into our boat, things are going to calm down. And they are completely amazed. Another miracle's just happened. And the wind stopped. As soon as he stepped into the boat, the wind stopped and they are astonished. Why are they astonished? Verse 52, they had not understood about the loaves. They had just seen this miracle of Jesus feeding these 10 to 15,000 people with 5 loaves of bread, but their hearts were still hardened. They still don't get it. So this next miracle, they're blown away. They hadn't learned, they hadn't gained any insight from the feeding of the multitudes that Jesus is God. Their mind is still not open to this possibility. And again, this event is a test. Once Jesus got into their boat, everything was fine. And in John's gospel, we see that they quickly made their way back to shore. Now, Jesus is going to return to the northwest area of Galilee, right? They're making their way to Bethsaida. And we've just seen a literal physical storm on the water. Now we're going to see a spiritual storm on the land. So when they had crossed over, verse 53, they landed at Gennesaret and they anchored there. So Gennesaret was the name of a town. It was the name of an area that this town sat on. It's like New York, New York. Again, this is an area northwest of the lake, and it was prominent. This was an area rich in agriculture. This was a thriving area. And as we'll see in Luke's Gospel, Luke 5, Luke refers to the Sea of Galilee as the Lake of Gennesaret. So this is a very thriving, densely populated area. Verse 54, as soon as they get out of the boat, people recognized Jesus and they ran throughout that whole region carrying their sick on mats to wherever they heard Jesus was. And wherever he went, into villages, into towns, into the countryside, they placed the sick in the marketplaces of those areas, and they begged him to let them touch even the edge of his cloak, and all who touched were healed. So now we have a spiritual storm. And these verses summarize Jesus' ministry in many towns. He was swarmed by the masses, and then he would withdraw. And then he would come back. He was swarmed by the masses, and then he would withdraw. And Mark now is starting to stress the immense popularity of Jesus and his generous healing of these multitudes of sick people. And the word healed here that we see in verse 56, all who touched his cloak were healed. That word healed means saved, but the salvation in view here is that the sick were delivered from their infirmities. They were restored with physical soundness. But of course, those who believe would have been healed, saved in a spiritual sense. And that is the conclusion of Mark chapter 6, and I pray that that has been a help to you. I know this is a lot of information. Don't let it overwhelm you. Take your time reading through Scripture. Go back, reread your notes, reread the chapter, rewatch the video, so that you have a greater understanding of what is really taking place here. Monday, we will resume our study. We'll look at chapter 7. And we're going to look at Jesus' next conflict with the Pharisees and the scribes over defilement. But thank you for being here this evening. Again, I do pray that this has been a help to you. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Have a great weekend. Stay safe and stay healthy. And I look forward to seeing you soon. Till then, take care and God bless. Bye-bye.